What if I told you that the tree that every child once knew the taste of is now virtually extinct? For thousands of years, indigenous peoples have used it as medicine, food, and even a toothbrush. Aristocrats considered it so valuable that they sent hundreds of ships across the ocean just to obtain its roots. It grew wild across half the continent, and already by the beginning of the 1900s, every grandmother knew one simple recipe, namely tea from this tree. Moreover, its taste became the basis of a drink that defined an entire generation and became recognizable throughout the world. Native Americans revered him for 10,000 years, and the colonists considered it to be on par with gold. Then, in 1960, the DEA suddenly declared the tree's aroma dangerous and illegal. Not because it was dangerous, but because the same aromatic oil that gave root beer its flavor would eventually threaten the multi-billion-dollar law enforcement system. And so, within a few months, the plant that had been a staple in the kitchen of that time for centuries simply disappeared. Today, most people don't even know what it looks like. But it hasn't disappeared and can still be found in the forests. But the most surprising thing is that the story of why its taste disappeared from our lives is actually much stranger than it might seem. Today, I'll tell you about sassafras, a tree that once saved colonists from starvation and changed an entire generation. Just imagine this was a tree that became America's second largest export commodity after tobacco. A tree that disappeared from every kitchen in one generation. But the tree never stopped growing. It was just waiting for someone to remember why it mattered and bring it back into the spotlight. Before you learn more about why, if these stories are important to you, the best way to retain this knowledge is simple. Be sure to subscribe and share this video with anyone who understands how important this is. Our story begins in the forests of eastern North America somewhere around 8,000 years BC. It was so long ago, long before Europeans arrived on the continent. And all this time, sassafras grew at a rapid pace from Maine to Florida, from the Atlantic coast to East Texas. Indigenous peoples of dozens of tribes knew him by different names. The Choctaw and Cherokee knew it, and the Tamaqua of Florida called it pavan. They didn't just use it, they truly revered it. The name sassafras likely derives from Spanish adaptations of Native American terms. The Nipmuc called it sasank pamuk. In Latin, it was saxopragus or stonebreaker, because healers used it to treat kidney stones. Just imagine how many medicinal properties one tree can have. It's simply mind-boggling. Every part of the tree held medicinal properties. The roots were brewed into a tea for fevers, colds, and to purify the blood. The leaves were ground into poultices for wounds, sprains, and insect bites. The bark was chewed for dental health. Its natural oils killed bacteria and freshened breath. Long before toothpaste was invented, the Choctaws discovered something else. When dried and ground into a powder, the leaves became an ideal thickener for soups and stews. They called it filet. This single ingredient would later define Louisiana Creole gumbo, a dish that literally exists thanks to Native American knowledge of sassafras. But sassafras wasn't just a medicine or a spice, it was a survival food. When the English arrived in Roanoke in 1585, they delivered one harsh truth. During periods of famine, settlers survived by boiling sassafras leaves. The mucilage in the leaves provided calories when nothing else grew. By the 1560s, Spanish explorers in Florida learned from the Timucua that sassafras could cure dozens of ailments. French visitors documented this. English settlers tested it. And then they discovered something that changed everything. Europeans were willing to pay any price for it. When the first shipments of sassafras reached Europe in the late 1590s, they arrived at the perfect time. A syphilis epidemic was sweeping the continent. Doctors had no cure. Patients were desperate. Then came reports from the New World of a tree whose roots could purify the blood and cure illnesses. Its aromatic scent alone was intoxicating. Legend has it that Christopher Columbus knew he had reached North America simply because he smelled sassafras on the breeze from his ship. By 1602, demand was so great that a single batch of sassafras bark weighed a full ton. In England and continental Europe, Apothecaries sold it as a dark medicinal drink called salep. It was prescribed for everything, indeed for almost every illness, be it fever, digestive problems, skin diseases, or rheumatic pain. It's worth understanding that sassafras tea did indeed have anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and digestive properties that indigenous peoples have known for thousands of years. Therefore, the price of the plant skyrocketed due to its properties, and after a short period of time, sassafras bark was sold for its weight in gold. Captain Martin Pring even set sail from Bristol, England in 1603 with one mission: find sassafras at any cost. His expedition journals describe the noble groves of this tree along the coasts of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. He filled his ship and returned to England a wealthy man. Just imagine, within the next 50 years, sassafras was the second largest export commodity of colonial America after tobacco. But there was a problem. The bark was the most valuable part of the plant. It contained the highest concentration of saffrol oil. Unfortunately, harvesting the bark killed the tree, and by 1626, just 24 years after the first 1-ton shipment, the English colonists were unable to fulfill their 30-ton export quota. They nearly drove all available sassafras trees to extinction. But sassafras, like many native plants, doesn't give up easily. The roots sent up new shoots. The seeds remained buried in the soil, waiting. By the 1840s, American entrepreneurs had discovered something brilliant. Sassafras roots could be used to make a sweet, fizzy drink that tasted like childhood itself. Root beer was born. By the early 20th century, sassafras had become woven into the fabric of American culture. Every corner store sold root beer. Every grandmother knew how to brew sassafras tea as a spring tonic. Every Southern cook kept filet powder for gumbo in the pantry. George Washington drank it. Benjamin Franklin extolled it. Thomas Jefferson served it at Monticello. Philadelphia pharmacist Charles Hyers turned it into a commercial empire. Hyers's root beer became a household name, marketed as a healthy alternative to alcohol. The smell, the taste, the tradition. It was as American as apple pie. Then came 1960. The DEA didn't hesitate to make an announcement. Saffrol, the compound that gives sassafras its distinctive flavor, caused liver cancer in lab rats. The evidence seemed compelling. Rats given oral doses of sassafras tea developed tumors, irreversible liver damage, and various types of cancer. Within months, saffrol was banned from all commercially produced foods and drugs. The Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21, Section 189.180, declared it a poisonous or harmful substance. Root beer makers were confused. They switched to artificial sassafras flavorings made from petroleum byproducts. Some used wintergreen. Others used saffrol-free sassafras extract, painstakingly processed to remove every trace of the dangerous compound. The $500 million root beer industry survived, but the traditional use of sassafras died overnight. Your grandmother stopped brewing sassafras tea. Phyllo powder disappeared from shelves or was reformulated. Herbalists stopped recommending it. Within a generation, most Americans forgot sassafras even existed. That's what the FDA didn't promote. The rats in those studies were given doses equivalent to 32 bottles of root beer every day for several months, an amount no human would ever consume, even if they lived on sassafras tea. And here's what they didn't tell you. Nutmeg contains saffrol. Black pepper contains saffrol. Cinnamon, star anise, and basil all contain saffrol. In fact, nutmeg contains 4 times more saffrol than sassafras. Yet somehow none of them have been banned. You can buy them at any grocery store right now. Why? By the 1970s, something else had emerged. Something the DEA hadn't announced in 1960. Saffrol isn't just an aromatic oil. It's a chemical precursor. Underground chemists in the 1960s and 1970s discovered that saffrol could be converted into MDA and MDMA, the drugs known as ecstasy and Molly. The synthesis wasn't particularly difficult. Extract saffrol from sassafras oil, run it through a few chemical steps, and suddenly you have a Schedule I controlled substance. By the time the war on drugs was gaining momentum in the 1970s, the DEA had a problem. Sassafras trees grew wild throughout the eastern United States. Anyone with a basic understanding of chemistry could harvest the roots, extract the oil, and start cooking MDMA. The DEA couldn't ban the tree. It was native. It's everywhere, and trying to eradicate it would be impossible, but they could make saffrol a Schedule I chemical, a DEA designation for substances used in the manufacture of a controlled substance, or essential to the manufacture of a controlled substance. Schedule I is the hellish category. Pseudoephedrine is on that list. So is saffrol. Today, it is illegal to knowingly or intentionally possess or distribute saffrol, knowing or having reasonable grounds to believe that the saffrol will be used to produce MDMA. In 2015, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police raided a clandestine laboratory and confiscated 1,500 kilograms of sassafras oil. News reports stated that it could be converted into 4.2 million MDMA tablets. And if you think about it logically, is it really possible that a tree that Native Americans have used safely for 10,000 years has been classified as a drug precursor? How is this possible? Not because it's dangerous in traditional use, but because it could be weaponized by people with chemical equipment. The DEA ban of 1960 wasn't actually linked to cancer. It was about control, about ensuring that a readily available natural compound couldn't fuel the production of illegal drugs. Mission accomplished. So one plant is being erased from the American diet while nutmeg and basil get a pass. The difference is, you can't effectively turn grocery store nutmeg into MDMA pills. You can transform sassafras oil, not because of danger, but because of control. But let's talk about what we've actually lost. Sassafras root tea was traditionally used as a blood purifier, a spring tonic to thin the blood after winter. Modern analysis shows that it contains compounds with real anti-inflammatory properties. This isn't folklore, it's chemistry. The leaves contain mucilage, the same soothing substance found in slippery elm and marshmallow root. This explains why Native Americans used it for digestive problems and why chewing sassafras bark soothed a sore throat. Sassafras powder is more than just a thickening agent. Dried sassafras leaves contain vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and manganese. When West African enslaved people in Louisiana blended their culinary traditions with Native American and European influences, sassafras became the centerpiece of Creole gumbo, a dish that literally wouldn't exist without sassafras. Its aromatic compounds have antimicrobial properties. This is why sassafras branches were used for centuries as toothbrushes, a natural way to clean teeth before the advent of petroleum-based toothpaste. And here's what no one's talking about. Recent studies suggest that saffrol, in small amounts, may have a protective effect against some cancers rather than cause them. It may even protect against them. You won't find these studies promoted by regulatory agencies. Research requires approval. Approval requires removing the stigma of being a drug precursor, and lifting this stigma threatens law enforcement budgets worth billions. So, the tree waits. Today, sassafras trees still grow wild in 20 states. You can walk through any deciduous forest from Maine to Texas and find them. In autumn, their leaves turn vibrant colors: yellow, burgundy, orange. They are instantly recognizable by their 3 distinct leaf shapes: oval, mitten-shaped, and trilobate. But it's important to understand, the trees don't care about DEA rules. They don't care about their classifications because they just keep growing. If you want sassafras today, your options are limited. It's illegal to own the tree or harvest it for personal use. Restrictions apply to the commercial sale, import, and distribution of products containing saffrol. Some people still make sassafras tea from harvested roots. They know to use it sparingly, traditionally, and not in the huge doses that harmed lab rats. You can buy safrole-free sassafras extract online, processed, purified, and diluted. It's not the same. The compound that made sassafras valuable for millennia has been removed to comply with regulations. Meanwhile, nutmeg, sitting on your spice rack right now, contains 4 times more safrole than sassafras. Black pepper, cinnamon, and basil are all perfectly legal. The story of sassafras is part of a larger picture. When a plant has been used safely for millennia but threatens either a profitable industry or government oversight mechanisms, it is persecuted. The rationale varies. Sometimes it's called unsafe, sometimes a drug precursor. But the result is always the same. Traditional knowledge disappears, and natural alternatives slowly disappear, and people forget. Your great-grandmother definitely knew how to make sassafras tea, and she probably remembers the taste of real root beer, too. You probably didn't even know what this tree looked like before this video. As you can imagine, it only takes one generation. That's all it takes to erase 10,000 years of indigenous wisdom. The irony is that sassafras could play an important role in modern medicine, given its anti-inflammatory compounds, its antimicrobial properties, and its traditional use as a digestive aid. All of this deserves research, but research requires regulatory approval, which is currently extremely difficult to achieve. So the tree waits, growing quietly in forests across America, putting forth leaves each spring, offering its gifts to anyone who remembers. The story of sassafras is not about the plant, but about who controls knowledge. For 10,000 years, indigenous peoples have known how to safely use sassafras. For 400 years, it was woven into American culture. Then, over the course of 2 decades, from 1960 to 1980, it disappeared. Not because science declared it dangerous in traditional quantities, but because bureaucracy, drug enforcement, and corporate interests combined to make it disappear. The tree is still here and the knowledge can still be restored. But with each passing year, fewer and fewer people remember. The elders who grew up drinking sassafras tea are dying, causing the recipes for making this tea to be lost every day. A new generation is growing up thinking that root beer is made in a lab, not from roots in the ground. This is not just about sassafras, but about a simple pattern. When plants offer alternatives to pharmaceuticals, they are immediately subjected to rigorous scrutiny. When they can't be patented, they are ignored. When they threaten control systems, they are banned. Sassafras threatened both. It was a true creation, accessible to anyone, and had a taste no corporation could match. It was an ancient tradition that did not require permission, but which had to go away. But what they couldn't erase were the trees, the roots, the seeds dormant in the ground. Sassafras is still waiting. And not for anything supernatural, he does not need any permission, only recognition. Draw your own conclusions and be sure to share your thoughts in the comments, as they will be truly interesting to read. All this video is for is to simply look beyond the rules and see what has always been right under our noses. A tree trusted by Native Americans for 10,000 years, relied upon by colonists, and which gave flavor to America's childhood. It never stopped offering its gifts, and we simply stopped paying attention to them. If you found this video interesting and helpful, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment so I can create more videos like this to help us preserve folk wisdom.